friends, it's time to turn the key. Release your stress and pain along with me, yeah. It's not about perfection, it's about the connection. Now put it on your canvas and let it be. We're having an art party. Why don't you come with me?
Hey everybody, I am Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today I'm going to show you how you can paint this really calm, healing scene of two dragonflies flying over a pond with light reflecting on the water. It's a very beginner-friendly lesson. I'm going to break down everything step by step, explain every technique, every color mix, every tool. To help me do that is my husband, John.
Hello.
He's going to make sure that whatever I'm demonstrating, you can really see with our camera angles. Where we need to zoom in, we're going to zoom in. You can watch this lesson if this is just something you're really wanting to paint. Everything's included. It's time-stamped. It's chapter marked. We've got traceables and resources. I'm going to show you how to draw it. It's very inclusive. But if you're wanting to learn how to paint in acrylic and you're a beginner, this is part of an actual complete course for beginner acrylic painting. And this is one of 10 paintings that I think every beginner should give a try at so they can do more stuff in their own personal artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've all got kind of little lessons that you learn along the way.
Little skills that build into other little skills. Plus we have all that kind of like first primer videos of like all those questions that you have as a beginner. So if you're interested, feel free to check it out. It's free and you can do it anytime. If you just wanted to do the dragonflies, you're going to really love this lesson. It is perfect for you. All right, John, I feel like nothing to do but to jump on in. In the first step of this lesson, we're going to want to do a couple things where we lay out some structural information for ourselves. Now I'm going to do a couple little tricks here to make it easier for myself. The first thing that I'm going to do is a ruler. Now this is a special ruler called a T-square, and what it's for is it just helps me draw straighter lines. You can do this freehand, absolutely. I've just found that with water, the straighter the line, the more it helps it look like water. I'm going to use a watercolor pencil. You could use chalk just as easily. And I'm going to draw a straight line across, and this is going to be my water line. Now, when I know my water line, I can come in and put my moon, and I'm going to go ahead and use a thing of tape because it's a good circle. You could use a couplage. You could use anything that's industrial and round. This one is about 3 inches across, and I want to make sure that I have at least 2 to 3 fingers from the top of the painting. I'm going to go ahead and draw inside. Right, and just let myself know where this round is. Now I picked blue watercolor pencil. This isn't a colored pencil because it is made to be water soluble. Mm-hmm. If you didn't have that, again, the kind of chalk that your teachers use or kids use is the perfect kind of chalk to just be able to easily remove. All right, when we have that in, which is pretty cool, I'm going to go ahead and grab a bright brush. I'm going to use this to create circular strokes that go around the moon.
Kind of just radiate out.
Radiating out. And I'm going to begin with, let's start with a little bit of purple. So let's take our blue and our red. Right? We're going to take our little blue and our red, and we're going to make a bit of a purple. Your purple could be a little different than mine depending on what colors you're using. And I'll come around kind of carefully. Oh, yeah, boo-booed there at first. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to come back with my tape again and reset the circle later. But because I want my moon to be very light, I'm not painting the dark color into where the circle goes. So sometimes I start from the very center. But if I know for a fact that I'm going to be coming back, I'll leave that white. Or I've got to paint it white later. Now, as I'm coming out, I can add more blue and a little less red. But I'm going to continue these radial brush strokes.
As they radiate.
As they radiate. Across the horizon, though, I've got to do a different little trick. I'll have to do it above and below the waterline. I'm going to come across with as straight of a line as I can muster.
Mm-hmm.
I could use tape or something to set the line, like painter's tape. But in this particular case, I'm going to just go from left to right on the edge of my brush, creating a crisp line. And then I'm going to start to pull that up. When I need a little more water, I'll get a little more water. Come over to my paint. I'm adding just a small amount of red to the blue just to deepen it. Take it more into an indigo space. And this first layer doesn't have to be perfect or neat and tidy, guys.
Yeah.
That is not at all required. We're going to be doing a couple layers, and it's about how they weave together that makes the painting look so beautiful. But brush directionality is a big part of it. I'm just trying to make sure that the canvas is covered up. Then I'm pushing the paint into the weave of the canvas. A little water.
Really, really pretty.
It is. Even in the beginning stages, it's pretty.
This will be a nice one to hang on the wall.
It's going to be a very nice one to hang on the wall. It's going to be a calm one to paint, but it's also going to be a calm one to look at. All right. Now, I'm going to want this to completely dry before I do the next step. So when we come back, make sure that your canvas is dry. Now, once this is dry, we can layer the next colors over it. That's going to give it some depth. And this is really kind of a fun stage, in my opinion, because the colors are so enjoyable and pretty. I'm going to take my red and kind of mix it into my blue. And then I'm going to add some white to that, creating this sort of burgundy pink. And I'm going to come around on short little rounded brush strokes and make little radial brush strokes out. It's sort of a dry brush. The stroke is curving. I'm on the edge of my bright. This is still my bright.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be weaving these. I'm going to get a little white. The lighter colors I'm going to want closer to where my moon's going to be. And then the sky will get darker as it radiates out.
Gotcha.
I'm going to wipe this off so that there's not a lot of water. And I'm going to take my blue. And I don't want to make it real light, so I'll bring the white over to the blue because I'm not trying to make a very light blue. I'm going to weave back into the little bits of purple on the wide. Some of these blue. Let's put some more white over into it. And white brush strokes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Weaving this in. See how my pressure is very light? This is what you're going to be working on at home, is capturing this like just dusting pressure.
Just brush and weave.
This is very dry brush. The paint is not wet on my brush. Now that's really pretty. I'm going to do a neat little trick here though. I'm going to take a little yellow, just a smidge, over to my blue, and I'm going to make a turquoise. A turquoise is a blue-green color.
Mm.
And I'm going to add a lot of white to that. I'm going to just place some curvilinear strokes. Also around. See how that's just very energetic?
Yeah.
This can be very streaky. That's okay. This is kind of like that beginning Van Gogh stroke. You're getting sort of an early sense of how that's done. And you just want to put a nice radiation amount. Radiating.
Radiating.
It's not radioactive. It's perfectly safe and calm. So I have this here. Now I want to do a little kind of something fun here. I'm going to take my red away from my purple because I don't want to get any of my purple in it. And I'm going to add a smidge of my yellow to it. Doing that a small amount of time. I'm not trying to make orange. I'm just trying to really warm this pink. And then I will come over here. Kind of add some white. There we go. Just trying to find that pink. Always add a little more yellow. And then I'm going to come in and kind of weave this through too. You can take this right up to the moon. And you can see I can come out into the sky a bit as well. Little short curved strokes. So the purple is showing through. All the different little colors kind of really show through, don't they?
Yeah.
Now what you see me doing here is trying to make sure that my brush strokes don't make even repetitive patterns. And that's because the pattern is what will kind of throw off the sky. But if you can keep it kind of irregular and playful, you can get a really, really good effect. And you can play with that back and forth until you're completely happy. Like if you were like, oh no, I want it to be a little more turquoise with some white, you could come back with that and see very easily. It just gets prettier and prettier.
It really does.
So feel brave and feel playful here. All right, I'm going to rinse my brush out really well, and I'm going to go ahead and dry the canvas. So I painted this in. The painting is completely dry, but I want to make sure that my moon is round and set. So I'm going to take my watercolor pencil or chalk, either is fine, and kind of reinforce that line on that moon. It doesn't have to be perfectly round, but you want it to be round-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take my 1/2-inch angle brush, because I just like the control of it, and I'm going to make a little bit of a gray. And I might add some yellow to my gray, a small amount. And I'm going to do it this way so that later when I come and add the lighter color on it, it has some depth and it can be a very light moon. I've kind of shown you guys how to do like a very cratery moon.
Yeah.
This one we want to do a very illuminated moon. Like there's a lot of sunlight reflecting on it. Using the edge of my brush to get a sharp edge. And because I used a watercolor pencil, it's blending in. If I use chalk, it would blend in. That's why I picked those materials. Not something that would resist the paint and be hard to remove. Now, this is a 2-layer moon, so I've got to dry this layer and come back and put another dry brush layer on top of it. So now that I've dried that, I can come back with a little bit of white and maybe a smidge of yellow, right? But it's mostly white, and just sort of dry brush, which means there's not a lot of water in my brush. My pressure is very light. I'm allowing the brush to kind of skip over the canvas. See how it's very light pressure, John?
Yeah.
And that's going to make a very bright moon in the center. And that will help our dragonflies feel like they're very well and backlit. And having the little bit of gray underneath keeps it from being just a white dot. More interesting. When I first did it, I actually did the traditional darker moon. And then I sat and looked at it for a while, and I was like, that does not look how I would want that to look.
Did it differently?
And so that let me know that I wanted to do it differently, and I made that change. All right, officially the end of the step now that we've done the 2 layers of the moon. When we come back, I'll show you the next layer that you put in on this painting. So we now get to add the water to our landscape. I'm going to start with my bright brush. Again, this is about 1 inch wide. If you haven't seen one of these before, they all have different numbers. They don't tell you the width, but that's what you're looking for, something about this scale across. They all have different crazy numbers. So what I found is it's just better to tell you all the size that you might be operating from. I'm going to take just blue, and I'm going to come across from left to right. You could go from right to left if that's easier for you, depending on your dominant hand. And I'm going to begin with just the blue.
All right.
And I'm not being too precious about it right now, but it is going to be a thing where I'm trying to keep my brush strokes fairly level, matching this line here all the way down. Right, so that implied line. And I'm going to turn my canvas just so I have an easier access to this side. But I'm still going to try to keep the brush strokes not at an angle. And even where I've got to go over the edges, I'll come back and smooth it out. Now, while it's still wet with my bright brush, I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a little white to my mix up here. It's a little yellow, a little blue, and a little white. It's a bit like the sky, right? And I'm going to come down the center, and I'm, again, turning it just so that I have nice brush control.
Makes it a little easier.
For me, yeah, it helps my dominance. And I'm going to come here and add a little white, green, blue down the center. All right. For this to work, I've got to dry this and come back and do another layer so it has the depth that we want on the water that's going to help us set up the reflections.
Okay.
So let's call this a step, get it dry completely, and then we'll come back and finish the water. So now that this is dry, I want to come back and add another layer of blue. The blue in many paint lines tends to be a little transparent. And I have found that in painting water, no matter what kind of landscape, whether I'm doing one of my very involved landscapes or one of these fun, pretty landscapes, having a little depth to the blue really improves my water. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with my reflection because it's the lightest. I'm going to take my yellow, blue, and white again. And I'm going to make a very, very light color. I'm on the edge of my bright. And I'm going to kind of make little dashing lines that are horizontal. If you see them, they're like horizontal. I want them to be as horizontal as they can be. You can come on the wider the edge of the brush, whatever gives you good results. I will let some of the blue peek through. And I do that because when the water ripples, I had a whole month-long course. It's called Acrylic April. And last year, 2020.
Yep.
We did, or was it 2021? I don't know years anymore.
This is 2021.
Okay. Then it was 2021. We did landscape.
We did.
We did. And we did waterscape specifically. We talked a lot about water as a mirror. That's 30 paintings on like one topic that we do every day. So it's a bit involved. But it's to teach landscape painting, and we really got into that. And this is one of the fundamental core skills that we really covered. So we've left those ripples there, right? Already it has a bit of that water reflection, doesn't it?
It does.
Your brain really finishes that if it's given a chance to. I'm going to come back with a little bit of blue, and I'm going to brush in, again, horizontally from the side. Sometimes I'll come in on the edge. Sometimes I'll come in on the wide. That means I brush across on the wide or come on the edge of the brush. Make those little differences. I try to let this be, a little bit uneven. And staggered as I can.
It's just those horizontal lines that are important.
It's very important on this particular water technique, that you keep those lines as horizontal as you can. Coming down. And you can see that we're weaving them in together. Rinse that out. Come back. All right, so it's like a 3-pass. Might add a little more yellow to that. Kind of more moonlight. And you can see that that just lets it create some dimensionality, doesn't it?
It does.
I don't try to make a very even, edged corridor. I want the water to pick out a little bit of different light as it goes. We have one final set of reflections that comes down. And when those are in, it really lets it take place. So I'm going to put this down. Put this brush down, and I'm going to get my 1/2-inch angle brush. Get it a little bit wet. I'm going to pull out a little white paint, maybe even a little yellow. Right? We had that with the moonlight.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come here and make little bright marks. Again, still very horizontal. Taking my brush up and down. This is what's going to be peeking between the reeds. This is the little sparkle on the water. Your water might have a little bit of green in it with the yellow, but that's okay because water can be very green.
It can, yeah.
So don't let that worry you. And you could use your big brush again if you wanted to. I'm using my angle so I can have kind of like smaller and little choppy lines. I'm just making little backward dashes. The brush stroke goes kind of backwards from the short end of the bristles to the long. Still trying to keep things kind of horizontal, even though there's a little sometimes curve to the stroke because maybe the water is moving. This will really create a framing of drama for our dragonflies.
Ooh.
White and yellow. You just play with that till you're happy. Try not to go diagonal, right? You just want to be coming down in little horizontal spaces. So we'll talk about that again just so that it's helpful to you because this is something when you're a beginner, you've got to learn how to do reflections on wet streets, on water, on different surfaces. So my basic brush strokes remained horizontal to create an implied line. I layered to create depth in the water, and when I came down this line of light, I made sure to have kind of an implied zigging and zagging on the water. Right? So the two reflections that I painted through here did zig and they did zag, and then when I come through with the white and yellow reflections, really white, where it's like the sparkle on the water, I still leave a lot of space you can see between the brush strokes there. So it implies that the water is maybe a little bit of movement, maybe a little bit of wind across the surface. Yeah. So that's how we did that. Now let's dry our canvas thoroughly, and when we come back, we'll start putting in our reeds. Okay, because our dragonflies are kind of close to us, we have to push the reeds back. And the way that we're going to do that is we layer them on first. Now, I'm going to use a tool. I'm going to use a chalk tool. This is a tailor's chalk tool. You could use chalk from a chalkboard like teachers or kids. I'm not using my watercolor pencil because it won't really show over the blue. And I'm going to come down here from this left corner, and I'm going to kind of curve myself a guideline that comes up. I'm just testing the direction of my focal cattails. I know that I'm going to have another cattail that comes on a counter curve, and then another one that kind of comes over here. Then I'm going to want to have its little long stem happen that way. So I've got my 3 focal cattails here. I know I framed this center in with another cattail that curves. I've got a very long one here. Then there is one that kind of comes in counter. And then another little short one. And kind of layers it. So, you know, you just think about the layering of that. And when you have those guides in, if you got something awkward, you can change it when it's chalk. It's tougher when it's black paint. That's why sometimes it's a good idea to give yourself some guidance.
Huh.
Right? I'm going to come in with my 1/2-inch angle brush and a little bit of black. I'm going to thin that black with water so that's nice and flowing off of my brush. The big trick on this is figuring out how much water your specific paint at home needs to thin. If you have craft paint, it might need no water. It may be perfect. If you have heavy-bodied paint, it might need more. If you had golden paint, it might need like more water. Like depends on your brand, your paint.
Right.
I'm going to go from the outside in, and I'm going to work from left to right, kind of. So let's come on the edge of the brush. Now let's make a nice little line. Now these we sort of have a little control over, and when I finish the line, I'm going to lighten my pressure to kind of make that a little more thin and fine. So counter curve line. I can come down here. See how you can do that both ways?
Yeah. Those little lines that have that gesture. That word. Gesture.
Little gesture to the lines. Those are pretty good.
Yeah. Very good.
Now, the cattails themselves are kind of little tubes. And I'm going to just make little strokes that go across, kind of implying these cattails. They're about, I do mine about a little 1/2-inch wide. And you want a little of the stick to come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can always like make it more long or more defined if you want. It's really up to you. Let's bring this one a little more down here. These are really fun. I grew up with these on my pond, and if you get a ripe one and you explode it, it just makes fluff everywhere.
They do. They're super fluffy.
Super fluffy.
Now, depending on your position, that can be a good or bad thing.
It's true. My parents felt like it was distinctly a bad thing. When you're painting black paint, guys, I just want to give you a cautionary tale. Go slow, take your time, and don't panic. Right? And remember, on the technique video, we talked about how to fix things. Everything in acrylic paint can be fixed. I'm not being super perfect about these little cattail tops, but already they look like cattail tops. I'm going to turn this a bit so that I just have a better angle for it. You could use a round brush or a different brush if you wanted to. It's really up to you. Put this one right here. Oh, this time I kind of layered them over a little bit.
Oh.
And that I have been known, you know, as you paint, sometimes you'll be like, oh, it layered. That's okay. When we put the highlights on these, it'll create the depth to them. Now, when I have those in, I can come in with my brush. And I'm going to make curved, long grass-like lines. They're going to curve up and down, so like this one's going to curve a little bit right. And some of them are going to curve left, and we're going to weave them together. See how we're doing that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to thin some more black paint. Still my 1/2-inch ankle brush. I like some of these lines to come above the water. I still like the water to peek through. I don't want to paint out my cattails, so I'm going to be careful of that. This corner I'm going to have be more solid black. Right? So that's like there's just a solid mass of leaves there. Let's frame in this with some more grasses. Pretty good. I don't want to paint out this cactus because I've got to shade them and get them in. Do the same thing over here.
Mm-hmm.
Flicking that over. Now this can be really hard when you're new to painting because just getting a sense of curving your stroke, pressing harder at the beginning and releasing at the end, those are techniques that you are learning to master in that first bit of time that you're painting. So don't feel like if that's a little bit of a challenge. I'm painting this corner more solid, and then I will bring up grasses, reeds really, water grasses, the leaves of the cattails, just all those little things that you find along a pond. But that's why we covered that in the technique class, is because, hey, it's a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put some up there, kind of peeking out from behind my cattail. There we go. Nice little framing. So what you have is this nice dark kind of silhouette that's framing. You want to rinse your brush out thoroughly. And for the next step, we really, really want to make sure that this layer is thoroughly dry. Okay? So come back with your layer thoroughly dry. This is a very pretty composition right now, but I want to give it a little more zhuzh, right? So we're going to create a little highlight on the cattails. It's night, it's dark, they are silhouettes, but they're silhouettes with some personality. So I'm going to take a little of my yellow and put it kind of to the side here. And I'm going to grab a small amount of red and make an orange, right? And I'm going to add a little white to that orange. Then I'm going to layer the cattails. And the way I layer them will actually put one cattail in front of another. If I come here, I'm going to come from the edge, and I'm going to make a little left to right stroke, and that's the beginning of the highlight. Come here. I let the little black edge be there so it's a little bit in silhouette. Half-inch angle, just going right to left. Now I'm going to go from, I guess, left to right. Did I just say that backwards?
You did.
Sorry, guys. You can tell me when I do.
But you know what? Sometimes your right is other people's left.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to go. Now, this was left to right. Now I'm going to go right to left. Oh, silly me. Oh, I'm so
don't
silly.
talk to me about left to right. I can't tell, as you can clearly tell by yesterday's reference photo. I do not even know how that happened.
Directionality challenged. So that looks pretty good, right? Let's add a little more yellow and to that mix and make a brighter kind of more yellow. And then I'll come over and create a very bright highlight with that color. And I'm going to very just delicately add just this little highlight. Left to right. See how that's like little delicate. So I'm leaving what's outside of it there. I'm just creating that drama. On the edge of my brush, just pulling. It doesn't have to be, I'm not making a perfect stroke. Notice that they're very irregular.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're bigger and they're thinner. I'm over here. Now I'm going to go from right to left. And I'm just doing this so I can get that effect a little easier. I like to place things where perhaps it's easier on me. All right, that's terrific. That's super terrific. I'm going to rinse, rinse, rinse out. Really get the paint off my brush. And if my paint isn't too wet, I can probably come back and even add a little bit of a little bright white highlight on a couple places. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Now, if you're having trouble doing this part, you just might need to dry your canvas. Like, I'm pretty good at doing wet into wet at this point.
Yeah.
But again, if it's giving you any grief, go ahead and dry. If you want to figure out why I can do this and you're struggling, I am very good at adjusting my brush pressure and the angle of my brush to come across the surface of the paint and just very carefully layer a pitch on there. Technical term. But that, that's a muscle memory that you do get over time. So you may not have it today. Doesn't mean you'll never have it. And it's always okay to just dry the canvas so that you get the effect. Right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how you got there. You just want to make sure you have the effect when you want it. So there's that bright moonlight on those cattails. Right? Isn't that dramatic?
Yeah.
Let's dry that all the way through, and then we'll come back and put the green highlights on the reeds and leaves. So just like the cattails, we can add a little bit of highlights to the reeds to give them depth, right?
Yeah.
So I want a darker green, and that means I'm going to take my yellow over to my blue, right? Because I need a darker green, not a lighter green. If I wanted a lighter green, I might take my blue over to my yellow so I could have a little more control over how it highlights. I'm going to add white to the mix just to give it some strength, and then a little more yellow just to make sure it reads as distinctly green. I'm pretty thoroughly mixing this one. And I'm going to come from the bottom and make some strokes upward just like I did with the black reeds.
I love how these glow.
Well, this will help, and I don't have to do too many strokes. This is just some dimensionality to it, right? You'll notice that I do hatch or cross across my stroke, and that's okay. If I need more green, I'll just make it. Once I'm here, that's pretty cute, and we could be done, right? But I'm going to get a little more yellow and just make a slightly brighter green. It's not thoroughly, thoroughly light, but it's brighter, and I'm going to grab some more white just to make a distinctive highlight. You ready?
I'm ready.
Upward strokes. I don't paint out everything I have. That's a big trick. Don't paint out everything you have. It's the contrast that helps you get the form. Sometimes a few strokes is better than a lot of brush strokes.
Ah.
Like that. We painted reeds. We're just whipping through this painting.
You really are.
All right. Rinsing well out. We're going to dry this. One, because we're going to be doing some close canvas work where you might be resting your hands. And whenever you might be resting your hands near on your canvas, you have more of a tendency to drag paint. You can always use a bridge or a maul stick to prevent that, but I've just found like a little ounce of dry is a good bit of prevention. So let's dry it and come back, and we'll add dragonflies. So we now get to do the last part, which is the dragonfly.
All right.
Okay. So these are really fun to me. They're a simplified dragonfly, but I think they're really charming. And I've taught them for a few years, so I know they're very beginner friendly. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of guesstimate the amount of space that I want my dragonfly to take. And I'm going to use my chalk. And I'm going to make a little curved line, like a little comma. And where I curve that, I'm going to make a counterposing curve line. But this one is going to go a little bit on my moon and back. So the tail is going to have at least 2 fingers from the edge of the canvas, so it doesn't get too big, right? So he goes well onto the moon. He's obviously not on the moon. He's just layered in front. When I have that, I'm going to give myself a little idea of where my head is, which is about the size of a pea. Good to know where your head is, because the wings start right behind the head. And the reason I want to use chalk to guesstimate them out is that it's really easy for them to get away from you. So if you do the chalk now, when you come back with the black paint, you kind of have an idea of what you're doing. And I let them layer over my cattails, which pulls them forward. And just try to keep the wings symmetrical as much as possible. When I have that guide in, okay, I'm going to get my round brush and I'm going to thin some black paint. I take 1 or 2 drops over, sometimes more, and I bring that water, swirl it into the paint to thin it, and roll it. Now, if you've got craft paint or fluid paint or medium body paint, you may not need as much as I do. If you're painting exactly my brand, this set, well, then you know how that one works. You know, I'm going to make a little round dot like we did before. That's the head. And kind of like this little dots going back. Now, as they go back, these little dot marks and little swirls, they get smaller and smaller. See? A little tapering.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to come on the wing and loop back. It's okay if the brushstroke's a little bit airy or streaky, because this is sort of that type of painting where things can be a little artful. And just loop back. You don't have to be perfect here, so don't put perfect pressure on yourself. This painting doesn't require that. Completed is always much better than perfect.
So nice.
I'm going to do the same thing. Little dots kind of going back. They're not perfect dots either. Notice they're just kind of like implied little dots.
Uh-huh.
There you go. Got the same lengths on both of them. That's something I always try to check. Is about the same. One little wing. 2 little wings. I'm really proud of this one. I think this is going to be a great lesson, and you guys are going to get such pretty paintings out of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Now, it's very important that for the rest of this to work, that this black paint is thoroughly dry. I know I say dry your canvas a lot. There's been a lot of watching paint dry jokes lately, which I've really enjoyed, because I feel like that's pretty much John's job, is watching paint dry.
I'm a professional watcher
of paint drying. But let's do dry dragonflies, and when we come back, I'll show you how to kind of get the next layer on them. Now I want to put a little color and pizzazz on my dragonfly, and I'm going to grab my white, and I'm going to come inside the wing. And I'm going to paint just a little bit of white. Now this is going to be one of those layers where we dry and then paint instead of having it be 2 separate steps. But it is important to do the drying when I mention it.
Right.
Let's get the unless you really know your art materials well. I'm going to add a little bit of white here. Coming down. And it's funny because I'll be adding another white highlight, but just doing this is going to make sure that my orange and yellow, which tends to be transparent, is bright on the wing.
Mm.
I got a lot of questions like, I'm really surprised you painted all those colors with primaries. And if you understand your paint, whatever paint you have, and its nature or its properties, when it's transparent, the things that it does uniquely, right, you can do anything. What gets myself, new artists, anyone really in trouble is when there's some quality that we're not familiar with and we don't know how to prepare or adjust for, have any strategies for. So a lot of what you're learning in your first time paintings is how to know strategies. And as a teacher, that's what I'm also trying to teach you, strategies to adjust for things for when I'm not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just trying to teach you for the painting that we're here together, but I'm trying to teach you things so that when I'm not there, you know what to do. Okay, I'm rinsing it out. Now, we do want to, they're even pretty white, but we do want to dry them before we add that next layer. So you've dried them. Make sure that the paint isn't lifting. And then we're going to come in and we're going to make some orange. Now, I will pull a little of my yellow out again, my red over here, and we're going to make some bright orange. All right, a little bright orange. If we want it to be brighter and warmer, it has more red. If we want it to be more yellow, we would add more yellow. So we're going to be in the red-orange right now. And I'm going to take this and just kind of brush this back on the wing. See, it's just a little bit of a tip on the wing. That's not bad.
It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's super pretty. You can do this. If it gets away from you, you can always bring white back from the center out. If it's too yellow, you can always add more red. This area has a lot of adjustment for personal preference. A lot of forgiveness. I'm just moving this around so that I have a nice angle when I'm doing my brush stroke. So this is the top dragonfly, even though I've got the canvas kind of turned to the side. And come here and add some bright oranges.
Yeah. Those are very bright oranges.
It does help it be very bright, even though I'm painting over black. Knowing when you need to put a layer of a lighter color to help a bright color be revealed is one of those art skills you want to work on. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. Maybe to these a little bit too. And see I'm kind of just layering over the top. Letting this dragonfly wing be maybe a little bit interesting. I could come back with red. It really, whatever my preference is. It's just nice to have a little bit of dimensionality. I'll rinse out thoroughly because these guys are pretty bright, right?
Yeah.
But we're not done. Let's get some white. I'll roll that out. I thinned it a bit on my brush. And I'm going to add a highlight to the head. And little dots down the body. How cute is that?
Very cute.
I can come back on the wing and remember how I said you could just counterbalance back and see that extra layer of bright white? Pretty powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because those dragonflies pop, pop, pop. If pop, pop, pop is your goal.
Yes. I am definitely a pop, pop, pop person.
That little motion I just did with my hands, that's me just pulling a water drop off the brush. Sometimes you guys can't see stuff or it doesn't really show it. And I'm getting more and more over the years in the habit of just saying, hey, I removed a water drop or this happened. Because those little decisions I make as an artist can be big information for you guys at home. Guess what? We just painted it.
Wow.
I know, it's so exciting. Let's give it a signature. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of my yellow over to where this green is, and I'll grab some white. I'm going to make very vibrant green. So it's like a color that is there, but also will show. And I'm going to sign over here at the bottom very carefully. As I mentioned before, I don't want to disrupt the whole painting with the signature because I didn't work here to throw it all off, just for the sheer joy of putting my name on it. All right.
Wow.
Isn't that wonderful?
That really is.
You guys, I hope you had so much fun with this. Okay, when we come back, I'm going to tell you what you need to do next. That was really wonderful to spend today with you. Whether you got to be here on the live or you're joining us on the replay, whether you've come just to do this one dragonfly painting or you're participating in the entire beginner acrylic paint program, I just really appreciate your time and support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That way you can be notified when I do more free programs or other exciting upcoming paintings. Speaking of, tomorrow we've got a really great painting coming, and if you're here on the replay, you would just go right to that next. If you're here during the live, I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow. It was a lot of fun. I cannot wait to see yours. I hope you'll share it with me. John, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you guys for doing this with us. We look forward to see your painting.
Very much so. So, here's your mission. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye.
It's about the connection. Now put it on your canvas and let it be. We're having an art party. Why don't you come with me? Straight from the hot party. Now everybody let it be. No need for words like can't or ain't. Just grab your brushes, come on, let's paint. Don't think too hard, it's easy. Plus it's a lot of fun.